The cameras inside the Porsche arena were already rolling, but what they captured left even seasoned tennis insiders stunned. Alex Eala had already been making headlines. First came her historic victory over Leylah Fernandez. Then came the unforgettable moment when she handed her shirt to a crowd of emotional Filipino fans. But the footage now spreading across social media tells a much bigger story, one that feels less like a breakthrough and more like the beginning of something extraordinary. From the moment she stepped out onto the practice courts, the atmosphere was different. Flags filled the air. Chants echoed through the venue. Fans packed every available space, hoping to catch even a brief glimpse of the Filipino star. Her warm-up session was intense, sharp, and relentless, drawing attention from players, coaches, and spectators alike. Then there was the emotional moment with a supporter who had reportedly waited nearly 2 days just for the chance to see her in person. It was one of many scenes that made it clear this was no ordinary tournament day. Something was happening. Something bigger than a practice session. Something impossible to ignore. Was it her fearless intensity? Was it the full force of the Eala phenomenon finally arriving in Europe? Or was it simply a Stuttgart crowd witnessing a new tennis star emerge before their eyes? Whatever the reason, one thing became impossible to deny. Alex Eala was no longer just a rising talent. She had become the main attraction. And then came the moment that changed everything. The second she stepped onto the practice court at Porsche Arena, the energy exploded. Long before she struck her first ball, fans had already gathered in massive numbers. Filipino flags waved proudly above the crowd. Voices merged into a single rhythm. Chants rolled through the venue with a force that seemed to shake the entire complex. It wasn't just support anymore. It felt like a movement. A celebration of identity. A 20-year-old from Manila transforming a practice session in Germany into an event that felt larger than the tournament itself. For a few remarkable moments, Stuttgart no longer felt like Stuttgart. It felt like history unfolding in real time. Laban, Eala. The chant rose again and again, growing louder with every repetition. It wasn't simply crowd noise. It was a wave. A surge of emotion that swept through the arena and spilled beyond its walls. And the videos now flooding social media don't just show support. They reveal something far more powerful. They reveal scale. The kind of scale nobody expects from a practice session. Because this wasn't supposed to look like this. Practice courts are usually quiet, controlled spaces where players disappear into repetition. But the moment Alex Eala arrived, the entire environment transformed. Barriers were packed shoulder to shoulder. Fans pressed forward with phones raised high, documenting every shot, every movement, every smile. Security had prepared for a crowd. What they got was something far beyond expectations. Thousands of voices moving together as one. And then came the clip everyone is talking about. No music. No announcement. No signal. Just a single voice beginning a chant. Then 10. Then 100. Then thousands. Eala. 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 The sound erupted organically, raw and unstoppable. The acoustics of the arena amplified every syllable until the chant became a thunderous roar. So loud. So unified. So overwhelming. That it briefly became the loudest thing inside the entire venue. Players paused. Heads turned. Even those on nearby courts couldn't help but look. For a moment, the biggest stage inside Porsche Arena wasn't center court. It was Alex Eala's practice court. And everyone knew it. Real scale. The kind of scale you never expect from a practice session. Because this wasn't supposed to look like this. Practice courts are usually quiet. Controlled. Focused. They're places where players disappear into endless repetition, far away from the spotlight. Not anymore. The moment Alex Eala stepped onto that court, the entire atmosphere changed. The barriers were packed shoulder to shoulder. Fans pressed against every available space, phones raised high, determined to capture every shot, every movement, every second. To outsiders, it might have seemed excessive. To them, it mattered. Every moment mattered. Security had spent days preparing for a larger-than-usual crowd. But what unfolded exceeded every expectation. This wasn't simply a gathering of fans. This was overflow. This was pressure. This was thousands of voices moving together as one. And then came the moment that changed everything. There was no music. No announcement. No signal from the organizers. Just a single voice rising from somewhere in the crowd. Then another. Then 10. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Eala. 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 The chant erupted naturally, spreading through the arena like wildfire. Raw. Organic. Unstoppable. The acoustics didn't just carry the sound. They magnified it. What began as a chant became a thunderous roar, crashing through the venue with incredible force. Louder. Stronger. more unified with every repetition. And then something remarkable happened. Players warming up on nearby courts paused. Coaches turned their heads. Officials looked up from their routines. For a brief moment, the biggest attraction inside Porsche Arena wasn't the main stadium court. It was Alex Eala's practice court. And everyone knew it. But somehow, that wasn't even the most unbelievable part. Because tucked quietly among the spectators, almost hidden beneath the chaos, sat a figure nobody expected to see. No entourage. No attention-seeking entrance. Just a baseball cap pulled low and a calm, silent presence. A legend. The kind of figure whose reputation speaks before they ever say a word. The kind of presence that changes the energy of a space simply by showing up. The cameras captured the exact moment it happened. Mid-rally, Alex Eala glanced toward the stands. And froze. For a split second, everything seemed to slow down. The crowd noise faded into the background. Her eyes locked onto a familiar face. Recognition was instant. She stopped the rally cold. And suddenly, the story wasn't just about the crowd anymore. Something even bigger was unfolding. Her hitting partner paused, visibly confused. But Alex Eala didn't explain. She didn't reset the point. She didn't return to the baseline. Instead, she took off running. Straight toward the side of the court. Straight toward the figure sitting quietly in the stands. Because some moments are bigger than practice. Some moments are bigger than tennis. Some moments demand your full attention. What happened next was captured from every possible angle. Phones went up instantly. Cameras zoomed in. Spectators scrambled to get a better view. Within minutes, the footage was everywhere. The embrace. The conversation. The reaction. As the mysterious visitor finally lifted his cap, a wave of surprise swept through the crowd. Fans exchanged stunned looks. Phones tilted closer. Social media would soon explode with theories. Meanwhile, Eala seemed completely locked into the moment. The noise around her disappeared. The crowd disappeared. Everything disappeared. For several minutes, the two spoke quietly near the court. Eala listened carefully. She nodded repeatedly. Every word seemed to matter. Every sentence appeared to carry weight. And whatever was said during that exchange has since become the subject of endless speculation online. Who was he? Why was he there? What advice did he give? To this day, the answers remain unclear. The identity of the visitor is still debated, still discussed, and still driving millions of views across social media platforms. But somehow, even that wasn't the most emotional moment of the day. Because hidden among the thousands of supporters packed around the practice court was a story that perfectly captured what this entire movement had become. And the cameras found it. A young woman, no older than 25, stood pressed against the barrier holding a handmade sign. The message was simple. 48 hours. 3 trains. 1 dream. Her eyes were red. Not from exhaustion. From emotion. Her hands shook slightly as she held the sign above the crowd. But her smile never moved. It was genuine. Unfiltered. Unforgettable. Then came the moment that changed everything. The footage shows Alex Eala noticing her during a rally. She stopped immediately. Again. Not because of the noise. Not because of the attention. But because she saw the person behind the sign. The story behind the support. The sacrifice behind the smile. Eala walked directly toward the edge of the court. She spoke briefly with security. Then she did something you almost never see from a professional athlete in the middle of a practice session. She made a request. And within seconds, the entire crowd realized something special was about to happen. She asked security to let the fan through. The reaction was immediate. The crowd leaned forward. Phones rose higher into the air. Every camera inside the arena seemed to focus on the same spot. Everyone sensed that something special was about to happen. And then it did. Alex Eala stepped toward the young woman and gently took her trembling hands into her own. "You waited 48 hours?" she asked softly. The fan tried to answer. She couldn't. Emotion had completely taken over. All she could do was nod as tears rolled down her face. For a moment, the noise that had filled the arena all day seemed to disappear. Then Eala smiled. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for believing in me. Not for supporting her. Not for following her. For believing in her." And that distinction mattered. Because belief is different. Belief stays when results don't. Belief survives setbacks. Belief is what carries people through difficult moments. That's what Eala recognized. And that's what she chose to honor. Then, without hesitation, she reached into her bag. The crowd watched closely. What happened next only made the moment more unforgettable. Eala pulled out one of her signature shirts. A piece of memorabilia every fan in the arena would have loved to take home. But this wasn't about creating a viral clip. It wasn't about publicity. It was about appreciation. She carefully placed the shirt into the woman's hands. The fan looked down at it in disbelief. And before she could process what had happened, Eala pulled her into a hug. The crowd erupted. Not with polite applause. Not with routine cheers. With pure emotion. A thunderous roar echoed throughout the arena as cameras zoomed in on the scene. The young woman clutched the shirt tightly against her chest. Her shoulders shook. Tears streamed freely down her face. And thousands of people watching understood exactly why. Within hours, the video was everywhere. Shared across social media. Reposted by fans around the world. Viewed millions of times. Not because it was dramatic. Not because it was staged. But because it felt genuine. And then the story behind the moment emerged. Her name was Maria. She had traveled from a small town in Italy. 3 trains. 2 buses. Months of saving money just to afford the trip. When she finally arrived in Stuttgart, she didn't spend time exploring the city. She didn't rest. She didn't sightsee. Instead, she camped outside Porsche Arena for 2 nights to secure a place at the front of the crowd. All for one opportunity. One moment. One chance to meet the athlete who had inspired her from thousands of miles away. Later, speaking to a local reporter, Maria explained why. "I wanted to see her," she said. "I wanted to tell her she's the reason I keep going." For a moment, she paused. Trying to hold back tears. Then she continued. "Every time things got difficult, every time I wanted to quit, I watched her fight. I watched her believe. And somehow, it helped me believe too." And suddenly, the scene inside Porsche Arena wasn't just about tennis anymore. It wasn't about rankings. It wasn't about tournaments. It wasn't even about fame. It was about connection. The kind of connection that turns an athlete into a source of hope. The kind of connection that makes someone travel across countries just for the chance to say thank you. And judging by what happened in Stuttgart, Alex Eala is creating that connection with more people than ever before. "My father passed away last year, and watching Alex play was the only thing that made me happy. I had to tell her." Those words changed everything. Because suddenly, that moment at the barrier wasn't about tennis anymore. It wasn't about autographs. It wasn't about social media. It wasn't even about fandom. It was something much deeper. A reminder that the impact of an athlete can extend far beyond wins and losses. When Alex Eala was later asked about the encounter, the emotion was impossible to miss. You could see it in her face. You could hear it in her voice. This wasn't just another fan interaction she would forget by the next tournament. It stayed with her. "Stories like that remind me why I play," Eala said. "It's not about rankings. It's not about titles. It's about the people. It's about making a difference." And perhaps that's exactly what the Stuttgart footage reveals. Not just a player. Not just a prospect. Not just a rising star. But someone building a connection with people in a way that transcends the sport itself. The viral clips aren't simply highlights. They aren't just crowd shots. They're evidence of something happening in real time. Something changing. Because Alex Eala is no longer just competing on tour. She's connecting. She's inspiring. She's resonating with people who may never step onto a tennis court themselves. And that may be the most powerful development of all. But the Stuttgart videos don't only capture emotion. They also capture evolution. The evolution of Alex Eala as a player. And nowhere was that more obvious than during a practice session that immediately sent the tennis world into a frenzy. The atmosphere changed the moment the cameras found them. The zoom lens locked in. Social media exploded. Because standing on the opposite side of the net was one of the most dominant clay court players of the modern era. Eala Effect. And this wasn't a brief photo opportunity. It wasn't a casual exchange of rallies. It was a serious, high-level training session. Focused. Intense. Purposeful. The kind of practice that reveals exactly where a player's game stands. On one side stood a multiple-time Grand Slam champion whose dominance on clay has defined an entire era. A player whose movement, anticipation, and understanding of the surface have made her one of the most feared competitors in the sport. On the other side stood Alex Eala. And what stood out immediately wasn't nervousness. It wasn't hesitation. It wasn't intimidation. It was confidence. Point after point, Eala matched the pace. Ball after ball, she embraced the challenge. There was no sense of a player simply happy to share the court with a superstar. There was only focus. Only execution. Only the determination to improve. The footage itself is fascinating. 2 elite athletes. 2 competitors developed through world-class training environments. 2 players exchanging heavy topspin rallies, testing angles, adjusting patterns, and pushing each other through demanding drills. What made the session so compelling wasn't who won a practice point. It was how Eala carried herself. The body language. The intensity. The willingness to attack. The refusal to back away from difficult exchanges. Every rally seemed to send the same message. She belonged there. Not as a guest. Not as a fan. But as a competitor preparing to challenge the very players she once watched from a distance. And for many fans watching from the stands, that realization may have been the most exciting part of all. Because the gap that once seemed enormous suddenly looked much smaller. And if Stuttgart proved anything, it's that Alex Eala isn't just attracting attention anymore. She's earning respect. Groundstroke after groundstroke, the intensity never dropped. On one side of the net was Alex Eala, just 20 years old, absorbing every lesson the session had to offer. Every ounce of pace. Every variation of spin.